What's up, witches, and welcome to all of the new members. If you haven't seen it already, I dropped a public video called Book of Shadows versus Grimoire, Mistakes I Made While Witching, where I talked about the mistakes I felt I was making when it came to keeping a magical record. The long and short of it, in case you haven't seen that, is that for years, even though I was calling my magical journal a Book of Shadows, I was really treating it and approaching it more like a grimoire, a collection of lists, charts, recipes, and spells that function like a guidebook or a magical how-to. Because of this, I wasn't using my Book of Shadows regularly, and most importantly, it wasn't a record of what I was actually doing on a daily basis as a witch. So I wanted to show you the difference between the two in case it's hard to visualize what I'm talking about in real life, with some real life examples from my own books. So this is my old Book of Shadows, and this is like the 75th version of it, of course, but the contents inside have been collecting since my college days, so since about 2004. It has sections in it, and it's divided by different topics. This is my new Book of Shadows. I got it late last year, and as you can see, there are no tabs, no dividers, no organized sections, but already I've written more in it than I ever did in my old Book of Shadows. And what's in it is alive. It's a living account of what I'm working on. So I'm going to show you some specifics about what I mean in terms of keeping something like a guidebook versus keeping an actual diary. So this is my old Book of Shadows, and it has sections in it, like organized, tabbed sections, herbs, deities, stones, zodiac info, etc. And it's got like, my info and blessings and various pieces of information and things like that, symbols and stuff. But like I said, I've always approached it as like a guidebook. So I've always been working on, how to have like referenceable information that I can go to and just like flip through easily, which is, nice, but like it's just not necessary to have lists of absolutely every possible thing or charts of every possible thing. And that's always been my focus, because I've always wanted my book to be the type of thing where, something comes up and I can just run to it and be like, flip, 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 there's the answer, like a giant guidebook. And like I said in my public video, I do think that that's, an admirable goal, I guess, or something that one day I could create. But this type of journal keeping really kept me from actually keeping a journal, because instead I would pick days when I had time to like sit down and write these things out all nice and neat and stuff like that, as opposed to maybe simply just writing a page about one deity or one spirit that I learned something about, or that I worked with, or that I said prayers to, etc., instead of just putting in, every possible piece of information. The same is true for things like recipes. So like this is my fire cider recipe, and it doesn't have any like information aside from just a list of the ingredients. And again, it's really helpful for me to be able to flip through this and just have it listed out. But at some point, it might also be better to have a recounting of like how I came up with this recipe. My recipe, I add pineapple to it. Why do I add pineapple to it? That's not necessarily an ingredient that's in traditional fire cider. So if I were writing about this recipe in the context of my new Book of Shadows, the way I'm doing it now, I would actually be writing about why I was using these ingredients. Was there a particular order that I added everything to the jar? How long did I let it sit? How well did I strain it? All of that type of stuff is missing. So it is nice that I have the recipe here, but it doesn't really tell me a lot about what I'm learning. So That's just like an example of the difference between like a recipe grimoire style where it's just written out for information versus a recipe Book of Shadows diary style. So this is my new Book of Shadows. I got it last year. And as you can see, there are no tabs, no dividers, no organized sections. But, let's see, this much is left. And this is how much I've written in just a matter of a few months. And yeah, I have written in it so much more than in my other Book of Shadows because I have been keeping it like a diary. I have just been writing in it based on what's been happening to me in the day and what magical things I may be working on. And just to show you an example of the difference between like a page in my now grimoire and how like a recipe would be kept versus how I'm keeping it in my Book of Shadows. Here I have the recipe that I'm working on for some incense that I've made to honor my ancestors. And as you can see, after I tried it the first time, I came back and wrote a note that this didn't quite work out, that I'd put resin and oil, and that might have been a really bad idea, and also that I needed cedar. You know, so I am actually documenting the process of working on this incense blend as opposed to just writing down the finished recipe at some point. This actually gives me some context. It shows me what I'm learning, you know, and all of that kind of good stuff. It's also allowed for my journal to be really multimedia, you know, mixed media. And I'll be honest, I have always been really jealous of how other people keep their magical books. If you follow people like Molly Roberts online, all the artsy witches, I've always been like, wow, like how did it occur to you to like tape that thing there or glue that random sticker there or whatever? And that's been happening by accident with my journal, by just keeping things naturally, because I have, you know, come across stuff that's like just too complicated to copy down or anything, so it makes sense to just like stick it right in the book somehow with tape or things like that. This is a business card for a man on Highway 17 in Charleston, South Carolina that I get my sweetgrass baskets from. But rather than like copying that information into my grimoire and having like an official, you know, guide for where to find sweetgrass, I just stuck the card right in there. And so that is really, really allowing my book to have this not only like actual lived in useful function, but also to have like a cool artsy aesthetic that, you know, with like without even trying, because I'm just putting in it different things. And then something that's really, really cool is Bossy Bruja on Instagram did like a she does like spells cast directly into her book, and I just thought that was such a great idea. So I've actually, this is a spell of blessing on my actual neighborhood and an indication of the locations where I've gone and made offerings and prayed for blessings and things like that. And I've cast it right into my book, and I can keep building on that and keep working it as I continue to do that. So yeah, my book has just become like a living document that I am engaging with regularly, and that serves as a real record of what I am doing as a witch, as opposed to just the final product or just generic information that could apply to any witch anywhere. So moving forward, I'll be writing in my Book of Shadows, and when I finalize things, I may write them out all nice and pretty into my grimoire, but that isn't my focus anymore, and that's been working wonders for me. I pray that if you make the same adjustment with your magical journal keeping, that it works wonders for you too. So if you found this video helpful, or if you just liked it, then make sure to click the thumbs up, and you can leave any comments or questions for me down below. Make sure to keep your eye on the community tab for members only info, and I'll see you all in the next video. Blessed be.